Hi, everyone. This is the Ego Project, and I'm Lisa Heidel, and I'm here with
Christine Seidel.
And we are here with
Haley. Haley and Hanna.
Haley and Hanna Newlin. All right, and we're going to be exploring self-identity today. Before we get started, we just want to throw a few things out to our listeners. One, go to our website. We have a promo code there for Instacart. And go enjoy that and, make your life a little easier. Right, Christine?
Absolutely. I love using Instacart. It's my favorite.
Me too. And we also want to encourage everyone to go back and listen to all of our podcasts, obviously. But the last one was with Joy Malik, who is a psychotherapist and works with introverts and highly sensitive people and INFJs, if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs. I absolutely love that episode. What about you, Christine?
I did. It felt, as an INFJ myself, and I know you are as well, it just really kind of resonated. And I think for a lot of listeners, as we hear about highly sensitive people, intuitives, empaths, it's kind of cool to understand that perspective from the Myers-Briggs types. And then also just to understand, how we are kind of experiencing the environment. So whether or not you're an INFJ, or somebody, love somebody, or care for somebody who is, it was just a really good episode to gain some insight into that type.
I think so too. And then this episode is being sponsored by Rise Therapy Center. Christine, can you tell us a little bit about Rise?
Absolutely. Rise Therapy Center is a counseling center for children and adults located in Roswell, Georgia. We are really a community that is highly focused on, providing mental health resources to all kinds of spectrum of demographics. We're in school systems. We work with the city of Roswell, where we're just very highly active in that community. But we also offer coaching services too. So for our listeners, if you've really enjoyed some of the topics that we've talked on, we have therapists if you're in the state of Georgia or any other licensed state that we're in, as well as coaching services to kind of delve into a little bit more of that psychoeducational component of the ego and how it might be impacting your life.
Oh, so good. All right. So all of this information will be in our show notes, in our description. So you can just click on that link and make your life a little easier. So let's get started on self-identity. Okay. Well, as we were talking about this topic, and, the ego is every topic, obviously, that impacts our lives. And self-identity, we thought, is there a better way to talk about self-identity than with identical twins?
Yeah.
That's some serious identity work, right?
Right.
Okay. So let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about Haley and Hanna. So, who obviously identical twins. Haley is a writer, an author, who grew up watching Vincent Price movies and hanging on every grim tale Lemony Snicket spun. Couldn't make that harder for me to say, could you there, Haley? It was no surprise when she began writing her own dark fiction. In 2016, her Gothic short story, The Tactics of a Cryptic Arbitrator, was a finalist in the Penman Review Fall Fiction Contest. She has published 2 novels, Not Another Sarah Halls and Take Your Turn, Teddy. Check out both of them. Fabulous books. And is working on her 3rd, The Nowhere Man. Her short story, The Butcher on Blue Jay Way, is featured in Kindisha Press.
Yes.
Okay, which / her anthology is what it's called. Yes. This collection has received praise from Stephen Graham Jones and Barbara Crampton. Haley is also a book reviewer for Cemetery Dance Magazine and is a co-owner of a business with Hanna, and I'm going to let them tell you what that is. And Hanna, hold your hand up. That way people know who are looking. They know who to. Okay. And then Hanna graduated with a degree in health and surgical sciences and worked as a surgical technologist and assistant for 3 years. She felt her life was not hers between the long hours and constantly being on call. During the pandemic, she realized she needed to make a change. So she went to work with Manuscripts, which is formerly known as Book Creators, as a marketing strategist. And now she started her business with her sister, Haley. Okay. And that's, gives you a little bit of a nutshell there. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your business, Hanna and Haley?
Yes. So our business is called Twins in Talent. And something that we noticed is, as avid readers, we were really excited to find what was new. So we worked our way through a lot of classic novels, a lot of just really famous literary titles. And we kept saying, what's new? And that was when we really started supporting independent authors. And we started reading independent horror and fantasy and even like some memoirs and things like that. And we kept finding that the stories were really, really good, but they weren't reaching people. They weren't finding those readers that were going to be the biggest fans of that piece. And so we kind of came together and said, hey, we both have experience in this. I used to teach marketing, book marketing specifically. And we thought, we wonder if we sat down together, planned content, planned a strategy, how this would work. And we found that it really has worked. It's worked really well. So we have worked with so many authors across genres. We also do editing, which is makes my heart soar. I love editing.
That is solely Haley.
She can have that, right?
Well, Hanna does proofreading because and proofreaders, Lisa can back me up on this. Proofreaders are equally as important as editors. She is fantastic at identifying character arcs, plot development, things like that. And something extra cool about her is when horror writers come to us, they say, oh, I did this little gory scene. Can you have Hanna check it? Because she used to work in surgery.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun. Yeah.
That is, you do get to still have fun with that. And I'm like, oh, this is like this surgery.
That's
so fun.
So good.
Sorry, I was just
nothing's wasted. Yeah, nothing's
wasted. Nothing's wasted at all.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so I think that's really cool that you focus on those independent authors, especially, since self-publishing has become so, across the spectrum of people being aware of it, whether you're fiction, nonfiction, how to all of that. Publishing used to be such a barrier to entry for people who wanted to write and get their creations or information out there. So to now have it opened up to self-publishing, great, you have this piece of work, but how do you let people know it's there? So what a cool, niche to have to really support such an up and coming industry that was really kind of restricted for a really long time. So that's, I'd also say overlooked too. We have found so many amazing queer authors that we've worked with, and have you pitched this to big publishers? And they say, yeah, we haven't really heard back. That kind of thing. And, people need that, people need that in whatever genre it's going to be. People need that kind of representation. And so I love to see independent authors working so hard to put it in there. And we love that we get to help find readers who are really looking for that. So thank you, Christine. Yeah.
And it's one of the things that's really cool is, we'll buddy read something, where we read it together from an independent author. And then Haley and I are like, this is crazy. This writing is insane. This is one of the best books I've ever read. This is my favorite book of the year. And then we'll go on Goodreads. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Goodreads, but it has, the book's description, reviews, ratings. Lisa, you probably really know. And there'll be no reviews for it. And we're like, how do people not know about this book? It's phenomenal. And so that's kind of one of the fun things to do is, we reach out to people and have them review the book, or, we start marketing for the book. And then to revisit that on Goodreads later and see, now this book has over 100 ratings or 100 reviews or something like that. It's just incredible because you're like, I wanted to find people who also would love this work.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as we're kind of talking about identity, what you guys do really does kind of support that, because as, a culture and as society, as our concept of identity starts changing and shifting as to what we, now include as far as identity, the voices get to be heard now. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. But what you guys do is open up the opportunity to draw people to voices that either sound like, oh, that sounds like my voice, or something similar to me, and they can connect, or open them up to a whole new world of people exploring other types of identities so that they can be, more aware and accepting of others. So very, very cool across the spectrum as to where you guys have found yourselves. So
thank you.
Right. I so agree. And, they say, writing has never been easier to publish and harder to market.
right.
And so what you two are doing, you are definitely giving opportunities to people that maybe never saw an opportunity or imagined one. So I think bravo. Good. Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Hannah, I'm going to have you move just a little bit closer to your microphone when we start talking. You're kind of losing you a little bit, and we want to make sure we catch both of you because it's about self-identity, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to let you two explain to us, you're a specific type of twin, right? And can you kind of give us an idea, those who don't understand the different types, what you are as twins?
Yes, so we are what's called mirror twins. And what that means is you are, instead of being twins being identical, which yes, we are identical, but we're kind of what's known as like it's almost a subgenre of being an identical twin. So we're a reflection of one another is basically what a mirror twin means. So it's, we were telling Lisa earlier before we hopped on here that I have a birthmark on my right side and Haley has one on her left side in the exact same spot. Or, I have an extra wisdom tooth on the right side. Haley has one on the left side. It's just kind of, so
Yeah.
We even part our hair on the opposite side.
So it's just kind of, there's some doctors who say like, oh, that's learned habit. It's not true. But then, I feel like the more twins we've met and the longer we've, been around one another, we're like, this is 100% a real thing. Like
yeah. And I think there's also some interesting kind of like just little things that support that. So for instance, when we were babies, Hannah was up first thing in the morning and she would sleep all night. I was always up all night and would want to sleep in the morning. So I can't even imagine my parents. I was just gonna say I can't even imagine my mother's poor, her frustration. But and so when my grandparents watched us and they were tired, my parents were tired, they thought, okay, just in case, we're gonna draw a sun on Hannah's foot and a moon on Haley's foot, just so we don't have any confusion there. And so that's so interesting to me that, even now that's true. I work really well in the evening hours and Hannah wakes up in the morning and is like, we should repaint the kitchen. And I think that I'm just like, it's 7 a.m.
And we did actually celebrate one of Haley's publications by getting our sun and moon tattoos, which we know is kind of.
I love that.
Yeah, so we got them on opposite sides, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it really is just it's rather as being 100%. I guess the word I'm looking for is identical for the same is like you're a reflection of one another. So we had actually met a set of mirror twins who one was right-handed and one was left-handed. We don't think that we're really that. I mean, Haley can do anything with both, but it's also, I think she was taught to use her right hand.
It was practice. I like read it in a book growing up, and I'm like, this is cool. Let me try to do it with both hands.
Yeah,
but
so,
yeah.
Oh, that's so
literal, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's so fascinating, right? Because as most of us do our self-identity work, those of us who are solos, individual births, right? So, one person birth, we have to do that internal work within ourselves, but only there, right? But you two are doing it within the definition of being identical twins,
right.
And so I think that's so interesting, as we explore this. Let's talk a little bit about your self-identity journeys. And either one of you can jump in. Let us know, what was that like for you, especially early life and then teenage years and now young adulthood?
Yeah, I would say that what's really interesting is how much the journey has how much we shifted throughout. So when we were young and growing up, we were very close. My mother said it was like watching little like monkeys. We would just touch each other's hair and things like that. And so we were very connected. And then as we started to get older, we found that things like standardized testing or certain things like that began to separate us. And that was kind of weird in itself, because it was like, okay, I'm better at this and you have to be better at this. And then so we got completely separated in our day-to-day lives. And so that wasn't normal for us. That was very strange. And it was difficult because Hanna is more social and I'm a little bit more reserved, kind of quiet. And
you have to feel out the surroundings.
Yeah, I have to kind of feel it out. So people take to Hanna very fast because she's very bubbly and sweet, and I'm kind of like, "What's your story?" You know,
like the INFJ that she is.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah,
yeah, yes. So I think that in that time we started to really separate from one another. But what's so different about, in our youth, as we got into middle school between now, is back then what we struggled with was the comparisons. Then that was when people really started to compare us. So it was like I was pretty artsy and I listened to like old music, and Hanna was very athletic and she listened to Katy Perry was her favorite thing in the world, and she was one of the most popular artists of our time. And so that was difficult, because then if Hanna was out spending time with friends and I was, in my room listening to John Lennon, my mom's thinking, Hannah's making friends, Haley isn't. What are we doing wrong, with Haley?
yeah.
And we feel that too. I would see her leave with friends and things like that. And so we definitely went through a phase. I don't know if you experienced this, Hanna, but I experienced I started to feel like, because Hanna, people took to her very quickly and she could talk a lot with new people, I took it as I was meant to be more like her. And so I'd say for probably 5 or 6 years, that was the big challenge for me. I kept my hair bleach blonde because Hanna kept her hair bleach blonde. I got into cheerleading because Hanna was a cheerleader, but I did find some individuality there, which was interesting.
I know it's kind of crazy because we were both athletic, but I could tell that Haley wasn't really enjoying a lot of sports and things that we were. And I think I could tell that they did not align with her at all. They did not, the entire time we were there, she's looking at the clock ready to go, and I was living for it, So I kind of told her, I was like, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do this. And she's like, but you do it. And I was like, it doesn't matter, because I quit volleyball that year, that our freshman year, and we've been in volleyball our whole lives together, among track and other things, gymnastics. And then I decided that I wanted to focus on cheerleading, so I left volleyball and Haley played volleyball. And I know that seems so small, but it went from me us having each other at practice to us not having each other at practice. And I think that was kind of it kind of forced us also to individualize a little bit.
And what was really, speaking of that time when I no longer had Hanna at the volleyball practices with me, that was when I realized I'd hated volleyball. She was going to go be a cheerleader. This was these new ideas. And I was like, okay, go do that. But we've been playing volleyball our whole life. Yeah. And she left, and I realized the only fun I ever had in volleyball was hanging out with Hanna.
Yeah.
And so that was weird. But I'd say it wasn't until our 20s that we really started to say, I am not meant to be a version of you. You are not meant to be a version of me. Yeah. And it sounds so crazy to only start to develop that ideation in your 20s, but being compared your whole life, I even went to medical school with Hanna. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And she's over there like, I get to use the bone saw today. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to faint. And
I did say that.
Yeah. And then first day it was doing IVs, and Hannah's like, ooh, you have a good vein, and does it. And I'm just like, there's your vein. It's so swollen, and it made me faint.
But she right for it.
Yeah.
We've ended on that one. I'm with you, Haley.
Yeah. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
I can't handle it.
Well,
and I
so-
love that there's people
Yeah.
who can. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
I love
loved
it.
that she loved it. That was really cool too, because we both started to love cheerleading, but I really saw her fall in love with surgery. And I'm thinking, like, I'm the screw up of the family. Like, Hanna picked a great field to get into. They were always going to need her one way or another. And I'm thinking, what do I do now? I kind of had an individuality crisis
Yeah.
at that point,
Mhm.
because I thought, wow, who am I? I have to know that to decide what path I want to take.
Yeah.
Well, I had no idea, and I was really scared. And I'm over here, my head's talking to me, anxiety, depression, saying, you're doing it wrong, you're causing trouble, these kind of things. And Hanna just like laughed at me and she goes, you're really having trouble deciding what you want to do? I'm like, yeah, I have no idea.
I remember that because she looked at me like I was being so insensitive, but to me it was just so obvious. I was like, you're a writer.
Yeah. She goes, you have 20, I think we're 18. You have 18 years worth of like journals and stories and things like that. And so I entered that fiction contest at SNHU, and Lisa was my first reader on it. And I just thought, if I can get this scholarship, then I can go to school and be a writer. Let me see if I even have any remote talent at this, which looking back, I probably didn't need that validation. I shouldn't have needed it, but desperate times, right?
Yeah.
And I just got a letter that I placed in the top 10. A few weeks later, I read that I won it. And it was such a profound moment for me, because I thought I had this path that I was supposed to stick to. Everyone in our family was so thrilled that Hanna was in medicine. And so when I figured out my path, I also had the people at the end saying, no, you're going to be on the writer's diet. You're going to starve. It's so hard to get into this industry. And then Hanna's like on her 3rd year of medicine and she's talking about surgeries. And so that was hard. For a while, I had that revisiting feeling that this brings you joy, but it's not what's supposed to be.
That's that conditioning. And I think that what's really cool and interesting about your stories and the fact that you guys are twins is that, when you were kind of just organically together, navigating your relationship in a very intuitive way at a young age, you didn't really notice differences. But then once you were kind of separated, we like to compartmentalize and qualify differences as either bad or good, right? And so almost within that relationship, there's this inherent qualifying to the point where I'm sure one of you, when you said your mom is like, why aren't you outside playing? What's wrong with you? That there was something wrong. And I think that that's where that ego wounding kind of occurs, is where we start believing that the way we are, there's something wrong with that, and that we have to shift it and change it. And so, being a twin is very different than having a sibling in that. So, it's almost like this, intuitively at a young age, how to navigate that in a very loving, kind, good way. But as soon as you go into the world, right, and everybody is fascinated by the fact that you're twins, they want to give you their thoughts about it.
Right. Yes. We have had dozens of unsolicited, just little comments, and it's been great. We used to get it a lot about, what did we get?
Usually about our hair, when you start dyeing your hair.
Yeah. So once I started coloring my hair, that was like, people would say, you don't want to be blonde anymore? What's the matter? You don't want to look like her? And I remember just kind of staring at people, and it was so interesting, because any individuality we had was viewed as we were trying, like forcefully, like clawing to separate from one another, and that's not what it is at all.
I also think one of the hardest things, like, not saying woe is us, we're twins, it's actually a major blessing. I just mean, one of the obstacles about being a twin is your individuality is strictly image to most people. It's because you look alike, so they don't automatically go to looks. They don't really, it's always so that, you know, they don't realize Haley's, you know, darkening her hair because that's more of who she is, rather than, like she said, like she needs to look like me, or it has to be a version of me.
Yeah. The day I colored my hair blue, I felt like my life started over. And I know that sounds so insignificant of a moment, but it was the first time I looked at myself and I thought, oh my God, this is who you are. I almost felt like I got like a second chance at life. Like, oh my God, I could look at the other path and say, that was my almost.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Wow. So you can see the projection that is just already put on you from an image standpoint. Once people are, you know, hear or see that you're twins, and in that projection is a sense of judgment, you know.
Right.
So wow, you know, that's like a whole layer that those of us that are just, you know, just single birth, you know, you know, we like have no concept of that just being part of your daily lives and your interactions with people you meet together, you know.
Right.
That's like automatically something that, you know, you're going to meet subconsciously or consciously with people.
Right.
Wow. Christine, when you get, you know, early 20s, you know, because I think a lot of identity work starts when you leave your family of origin, typically, right? You go off to college, or you go out on, you know, following a career path or a life path. And so what is one of the first things that you tell people who are needing to do some identity work or wanting to do it? Like, where do you focus them?
You know, I think it's so funny that every time we have this ego conversation about how do we get started, it's always the first thing, and that is withdraw to self. And so, yes, inherently, when we leave our family of origin, whether physically or, you know, situationally, because we're going to college and we're spending more time away, or we're starting careers, we may still live in the same household, but we start living these very more self-focused lives of like, this is who I am. That withdraw developmentally at that stage makes you spend more time intuitively with your own thoughts and your own feelings, to the point where, you know, Haley started seeing the world as a reflection of who she wasn't. You know, when we are just constantly sitting with other people and, you know, connecting, you know, giving and just being in the hustle bustle of an energetic exchange, we're not clear on, is this my energy or is this somebody else's energy that
right.
I'm as my own? So by withdrawing and, you know, sometimes physically removing yourself, you kind of clear out the noise, and you're sitting with yourself a little bit more, and these intuitive thoughts and feelings start coming up, and it's like, well, where did that come from? Right. Then you start seeing yourself coming in and out of, you know, family relationships or close friendships, and in each one of those in and outs, you're learning a little bit something else because you're withdrawing again. Right. And that's what that age does, is you're no longer going to school 6 to 8 hours a day and going to practice and doing this very, you know, kind of rote living where you really don't have a lot of permission to withdraw to self. But at that age, developmentally, you're encouraged. Hey, go figure yourself out. Okay.
Yeah. Right. And then there's still one thing that I think I hope this doesn't sound too preachy, but I think something that is embedded in our societal structure is this idea that once you go through all these standardized tests, once you sit through and read the same books that everybody's read for the last 30 years, once you do that, you are supposed to know what you individually, what makes you happy that you can do for the rest of your life. But there's no training in schools that helps you discover that. And that's where I think that's where kids really struggle, and we struggle, because when you don't have that opportunity, that space to get to know yourself, like you said, all you do is suck in the energy of everyone else. And if that doesn't feel aligned with your own, that's very isolating. That's a very lonely feeling.
Right.
Well, we live in a culture that preaches individualism, right? Like we're our own person, individual, yet we expect everyone to be homogenized. We expect them to learn the same way, you know, want the same things, do everything like everyone else's, and that's the right way, right? And no wonder we're so confused.
Yeah.
Right.
complete contradiction to what we're being told is the truth and the actual truth. So,
Right.
you know, I
Yeah,
agree.
and we don't in our school systems, and this is my little soapbox I'll get on, is we don't, we don't teach kids how to build their intuitive faculties, right? And their intuitive abilities. We literally just send information, data, content to them in the school systems, and then we send them home, and then they're scrolling, and all they're doing is consuming information. And when you're constantly consuming, there's no space for intuitive, just mindfulness, which is where things land with us. So in the school systems, if you're somebody that whatever is being presented as a reflection, if that feels in a line, then that's you getting your intuitive, assets right then and there. But if it's landing on you and you're like, it doesn't feel right, but this is what I'm supposed to be, then we do get that kind of wobble. But our schools don't, have intuitive classes or spaces to withdraw, like as a learning faculty. It's just content and data regurgitation, which only, really measures intelligence to some point,
Right.
So,
So would you say, Hannah and Haley, that your ego healing, first, your ego wounding, sounds you both did a great job explaining what some of that ego wounding from being twins is.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, Haley, you felt, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the way Hannah was doing things was the right way. And
Right.
the way it was wrong. So Hannah, how did you have any ego wounding in there based on being, a twin and having to self-identify yourself individually?
I think at times I would try to make myself smaller, because I felt as if because I was a little bit more social and I was in so many different activities and things. So I did know a lot of people. So there'd be some times where I would try to quiet down and or not. I would try to introduce her first and kind of let her talk first, or I would try to kind of keep the conversation about her, not necessarily in a bad way. I just mean I would kind of, I feel like that's the best way is I would try to shrink myself a little bit. Like I want to make sure Haley's getting noticed enough. And then so we kind of noticed, anytime I got an award or something, I was like, oh, I feel bad because Haley didn't get the same award, even though it's in something that she doesn't do. So it's just almost a feeling of like my wounding was almost this kind of like guilt, I guess,
Yeah. Like it, which when we look at the ego, it likes to move that into shame,
Right.
Like feel shame about, being, popular. You should have shame because this is easier for you, like you're not doing enough for somebody else. So, when we have these conversations, and that's why I think it's really cool that we not only get to kind of talk about the ego as a concept, but we can see how it works in this type of relationship. Just because it looks like things may have been easier doesn't mean that wounding didn't occur, right?
Right.
Yes. To always be mindful of.
Right. And something we experienced that we discuss now, after we've both been in some therapy, and that's the cool thing too, is once we've both started therapy, we were able to look at one another with a whole new lens of empathy and appreciation. We just, for the longest time, we spent this time trying to establish ourselves as individuals. And then it became this thing of kind of resenting each other. We had a few years where we were not close. We were not close at all. And one thing that we've really worked on with each other is the way we react to conflict. It's very different. We react to conflict very differently. And, that used to result in me feeling shame because I'm a little bit more.
Haley is not afraid to say what she's feeling, and that's a great quality to have, because the people pleaser in me, I'm always just like, oh, I hate conflict, I just want to freeze and make, hopefully this goes away, so
Yeah, and where I'm not a confrontational person. It's more that because I spend time isolated, and I need that as an INFJ especially. I feel very protective of the mood and enrichment I get during that time. And if I don't feel it in a social setting or in a conversation, I have a really hard time not expressing that. And what I mean by that is I'm not like, oh, I'm not interested in this conversation. I will I will literally start to be dissociative and I don't even realize it.
Mm.
And but now that I've communicated that with her, she can see that.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of start to like pull myself back. Or if it's something that's a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Something that's a little bit deeper maybe, or something that does require a bit more of a emotional reaction, she kind of shuts down, where I'm like, nope, here and now is where we hash this out, because I can't walk away and be in my space if that energy is still with me. And I think that's another thing as being twins is we'll kind of come. So I live upstairs and Hannah lives downstairs. We will sometimes literally meet one another in the middle and just go, are you okay? And she'll go, are you okay? And it's like we have this little feeling, even if it's just a frustration with work, or if it's, if it's a kind of a mental health crisis day, we really need each other.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, you have this built-in, mirror, right? Like,
right,
gives you that immediate feedback, because you're so in tune to each other, right? To your energies, and that sounds so different. I mean, I have siblings, but it's not the same because there's age and developmental differences.
right.
You two are very much lockstep, it sounds like, in your development as far as what you're going through in life, right? So is that typical, Christine, like with development and being attuned to each other emotionally?
Well, I mean, I think, therapeutically, when you're really close, especially at this phase of life, not until you get into your 30s and 40s does the age difference really not mean as much, because we're all kind of doing this adulthood thing. But at this age, as you're, career wise and personal life wise, everybody's kind of moving in different directions, whether you're wanting to partner with somebody or focus on a career and all these things. So, at this developmental stage, there still is a lot of like energy wobbles that can occur. But the fact that you guys have twins it brings a whole new element to it. And also I can speak to that because I've seen your body graphs and I've looked at your emotional that you guys may be in situations because you're the way that you guys were kind of how you came into this world was very similar. You probably navigate energy in similar ways, but with your own kind of conditioning and subconscious beliefs around it that you have to kind of unlayer. So I'm not surprised that, when they talk about people saying twins can sense each other's energy, I think it's because you have energy sensors that know how to pick up on it, right? So it's like, I know how to pick up on this energy for myself. Therefore, since it's the same in my sister, I can pick up on it there too. And so again, that's a blessing and a curse at times, because you're like, is this mine, or is this my anxiety I'm holding on to, or is Hannah anxious today? Let me go check in with her,
Yeah, we experience that a lot, of carrying one another's kind of moods or anxiety. Like, so we get in the habit sometimes we've recently gotten in the habit of saying, I love you. That sounds frustrating, but I don't have the space for this.
Mm-hmm.
And because we used to just kind of trauma dump on one another, or, say, I'm really anxious. And we kind of had to learn that just because we understand each other probably better than anyone else doesn't mean that we're always available to one another.
Yeah.
And that was weird at first, because we started to feel resentment at times, because I'm like, I'm really anxious and she's over here talking about how really anxious she is. But we also, I think sometimes as twins, and the way people view us, sometimes we act in a way as though we can read the other's mind, when you can't. You still need that conversation. So I feel, we always say that our relationship is like a marriage. We have worked at it the whole time we've been together.
And part of that is healing that, that kind of, as you say, your wounded ego. It's kind of healing that, because, there's so much in this time where there's such a positive to us being able to feel each other's needs as well.
Right.
You know, kind of like at birth, actually, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of another, not a mirror thing, but it's kind of like an opposite. Haley was born naturally, and I was emergency C-section.
Wow.
So my poor mother got to experience both. But it was crazy because, you know, we were both preemies and I needed a blood transfusion, and they were telling my mom, you know, like, twin B may not survive the night, like, kind of, you know, my mom was kind of preparing for the worst. And then one of the nurses that night had the idea to put Haley in my incubator.
And that's how little we were. We could both fit into one incubator.
Yeah, we were smaller than 4 pounds. But so she put Haley in there with me, and then, like, they said almost instantly all my vitals were perfect.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And
yeah, that was
so
your
I was
needing her, you know, that's
exactly.
how you guys regulated each other, you know. So I think that I think y'all's story is so cool, and your journey is really interesting from the Ego Project, because, you know, we can see the conditioning occur, the wounding occur, the separation happen, but then also the reparative work of what you just said right there, you know, having boundaries within a relationship that sometimes people aren't intentional about having boundaries. Well, you're my twin. You should know, you should be there. You know, you should be feeling what I'm feeling, but recognizing I don't have space for that. But I do care about you and I love you, but at this time, like, I'm not available, but let me circle back when I am. And just, you know, that just goes to show that you guys have done so much work individually and within the relationship to honor that space by creating healthy ways of navigating, you know, when we're showing up and not really available for that.
Yeah, so, it was something we definitely had to work on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
It doesn't come real easy. It doesn't come real easy.
No.
I love that you said that, because I think people have this idea, as you know, we're going through life and we're getting better at being ourselves, that it's a destination, right? It's not.
Right.
You know I'm in my middle years and I'm still doing identity work. I mean, it's a constant, you know, you get more information, you integrate that, you do more healing, you know, wounds that you didn't know were there are still there, come back up, and
there's a new one you didn't know was there.
Yeah.
It's Thursday and here's a wound, you know, it's that type of thing. And it's like, it's just this constant work. And I love that you two have each other to kind of do this together with. I mean, that's love, you know, because it can be very isolating when you're trying to do healing work, you know, alone, and that you have each other to, even if you're not doing, you have to go inward, obviously, to do that healing work, but you can, you know, there's someone upstairs that you can go check in with.
Right.
Yeah, that's lovely.
You know, kind of going back to Haley's introduction, you made Lisa have, you know, one of the hardest things to say when you're talking about Lemony Snicket. But we actually have our very first tattoo together. I keep saying it, but we have a few tattoos together. Is we both have sanctuary on our forearm. If you can see it. And it's actually from a Lemony Snicket book. It's from the first series of Unfortunate Events. It's from one of our favorite quotes, and the quote is sanctuary, a word which here means a small safe place in a troubling world. So we just said, you know, our sanctuary was each other, not necessarily a place. It was always each other. Right.
When we were kids, we had some childhood trauma for sure. And one of those key elements was my mother was in a few abusive relationships, and it's confusing for kids, you know, and it's very confusing to see someone that, you know, is kind of at that time when you're a kid and you're in the transformative years, you think your parents are the heroes, you think your parents have these perfect lives and they've done everything right and they brought you here. And so when my mom went through that really tough period in her life, we felt so much confusion of where is our safe point, you know, what is safety to us. And because with that trauma came so many moves, we did not live in a home for longer than a year until we were about 20. 20. So we'd moved every year our whole lives. And so we started to really try to comfort one another in the fact that the home was never a building. that the home always existed within one another. And that has made us so much more appreciative of one another. So when she goes and stays at her boyfriend, I mean, we did decide to buy a house together, but when she goes and stays at her boyfriend's, she comes in the door and she goes, I missed you. I just missed your mind and things like that. And I experienced that too. I'll even make a joke to my boyfriend, Jeremy, and I'll go, Hannah definitely would have laughed. Hannah would have thought that was hilarious.
Do you?
Oh, that's so cute.
You know, and I love the relationship, because I think so often people think, well, if we're going to individuate, then we act like we're not something.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
right.
You recognize this special relationship, and you're not going to act like it does not exist. It is part of your identity, and it sounds like in a healthy way. You know, and I think so often we think there's, once again, you know, I'm my own person and nothing's going to kind of make me something. Does that make sense?
Right.
Can you help me out, Christine, a little bit with that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, sometimes when we talk about individuality, we again go on the end of a spectrum where it's like me, myself, and I, you know, this is me, I don't need anybody else. But, you know, part of our basic needs, you know, that hierarchy of needs is that sense of connection and belonging. And to be able to call each other a sanctuary it shows that even through all of the challenges of life, you know, through the reparative work, you've still been able to come back to this place of connection. And even though you are your own selves, you're independent, that your identity has a sense of belonging with each other. And that's okay, regardless of who you're partnered with or what you go do or any of these other things, that still gets to be part of your identity in a beautiful way, and not in a way that, you know, reiterates that woundedness from the past. So that's really cool.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to let everyone, my cat is making a cameo, an audio cameo behind me. So I don't know if you're picking that up or not, but that's okay. He's all right. But it's just so funny. It's like he's agreeing with the whole conversation.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's
We
all
don't
about
know.
it.
We don't know if you guys could hear it, but we've been like muting our microphones between the conversations because we have our little dogs in the office with us because they're very calm. And then our German Shepherd is just kind of like, hey, what's going on in there?
Never crossed my mind to mute my mic. Oh, that's all right. But that's all right. We are unedited. We go with the flow here because we're always doing ego work, right? People are always doing ego work. Okay. Well, I have to ask this question. So if you're giving advice to anyone, you know, regardless of age, on starting to do some ego work and ego healing around self-identity, what would each one of you want to offer?
You know,
Oh,
the biggest.
I can't hear you. Can you?
Yep.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is finding what you enjoy and doing that as much as you possibly can. You know, because there's so many, you know, you guys kind of said there's so many things that we think we should do or what society tells us to do. And it may not be necessarily what aligns with us and our healing journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about you? You're like, oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I think my advice would be to find, kind of building on what Hannah said, to find what makes you, to find your blue hair moments where I put blue colored conditioner in my hair for a concert.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so me. Then I said, okay, well, what else makes me feel very me? You know what? I always feel my best when I'm in black. I love wearing black, and I think it aligns with things I love. It's like that spooky kind of musical element. And the more I leaned into that, I mean, even a year ago, you can see me in these bright colored clothes, and I look at those now and I say, who is she? Who is that? And I think once you find those little parts of your personality, of even just your day-to-day habits that give you even the briefest of just pleasure or joy, or maybe even pride in who you are, you need to make sure you spend time with those moments and see how they can be ingrained in your life. And I think what's cool about that is once you have just, I mean, it continues, it grows throughout your life, but once you have an idea of these little elements that you are proud of, that you feel safe in, that you feel loved in, I think that you start to understand boundaries a little bit too, because then you're saying, ooh, I feel really loved before, but I'm not feeling that now. Maybe this doesn't belong in my space. This can't sit with me. And so I think that that's really important, as well as getting to know yourself and getting to know your boundaries.
I mean, honestly, thing to add to that would be, it's kind of funny, but I used to say it to myself in my head all the time as a mantra, and I'm sure there's a more poetically way of putting it, but I always just said, don't be afraid to suck at something. Like, I know it's pretty blunt, but I would say it to myself all the time, because when I was leaving high school, I was like, okay, I want to be in radio, I want to be in TV, but I also want to be in medicine. But then, I started doing radio, and there was people who were a lot better than I was. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to try TV. And at first I was really scared. And I was like, you might suck, but there's part of you that really wants to try this. So we're going to try it. And so I just, I kept saying that to myself. And I think that would be a pretty good piece of advice, because I think there's so much we don't do in life because we're afraid of looking foolish or afraid of the negative outcome.
Yeah. And I feel like I definitely had that kind of come 180 for me with, I sucked at being Hanna.
Yeah.
I really sucked at being Hanna. And
thankfully, right? Thankfully.
Yeah.
Because you're fabulous, Haley. You're fabulous, Haley.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that, and the other thing too, is once you kind of have that established of these little elements that you enjoy about yourself, that you love, that you want to nourish, I think that also puts you on this path to find the people who also love those elements, who also feel nourished by them. And that was a thing for me. And Lisa, you can definitely attest to this. Growing up in Lafayette, Indiana, I did not have a lot of people say, wow, those scary stories are really cool. Or, oh my gosh, I love that you have this gothic kind of attire. It was, what is wrong with that girl? And why doesn't she look like the girl standing next to her?
Yeah. Like the environment you're in, conditions a lot of what you feel, you're safe to put out there,
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's really where the self-identity works, right? And I love that you said that, because you've really bloomed where you're planted, right? And that's where you're planted right now. And you're both blooming there in your own ways. And, and I have to say that you've gone into business together as siblings, is also remarkable. And you're being, you're using your skill sets, each individual skill sets to really make a difference for other people. And, isn't that what life is about? That's beautiful. Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's beautiful put.
Yeah. Must be a writer.
Christine, do you have anything else to offer on with Hanna and Haley or self-identity?
No, I mean, I just so appreciate you guys, sharing your story and kind of being a testament to, recognizing why self-work is so needed, regardless of whatever, situation or relationship you're in. A lot of times people will just stay in relationships because that's what they're used to. And I think you guys could have very easily navigated being twins with your wounding, but I doubt you would have really seeing yourself as seeing each other as sanctuaries, but you've done a lot of work around the deconditioning and the repair, so much so that you're actually in business together, which we know that you have to have a pretty solid sense of self and the relationship to do that together. So I so appreciate your story and sharing it with us. And I think you guys were just the perfect guests to have when it came to this topic. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This felt very therapeutic. I think sometimes it's so important to stop and reflect on how far you've come, but I'm especially thankful of how far we've come in our relationship, how we have really accepted one another's individuality and how much that has just made us that much closer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful.
And, we're coming up on our business have been for business for a year now.
Yeah, almost. 1 year in Twins and Talent. And it's one of those things where we thought, are we crazy? Are we crazy here? And it picked up, and Hanna left the hospital and took a break from doing that. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's great.
It should always be fun.
Yes.
Fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you both. We'll love to have you back individually and together with other topics in the future. And we just love this conversation. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. And we are just loving these conversations. So we want you to keep joining us and make sure to check out Twins and Talent.
Yeah. And we'll have all of your links and information in the bio so that people can find you pretty quickly after listening to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, everyone. Have a great day. All right. Bye-bye.